Good evening, everyone. My name is Ware Harmon, and I'm the Executive Director of Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of our team, as well as our friends at Elliott Bay Book Company, it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's presentation of Derecka Purnell in conversation with Nikkita Oliver and Darnell L. Moore. As we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We're very glad you've joined us for tonight's virtual event, which will likely run around 60 minutes, including Q&A. To integrate our audience experiences on those nights when we have live audiences in the building, we've changed the Q&A platform this year. To submit your question, please enter meet.ps/Purnell or scan the QR code right now on the screen with your smartphone. We'll drop the link in the chat and remind you later on how you can actually manage this process. We can't guarantee we'll be able to address every question, but we will try to get to as many as possible. And you can do your part by keeping your answers succinct and by ensuring they finish with a question mark. So those of you who want to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button in the bottom right corner of the video player. Town Hall's adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming programs include appearances by Susan Orlean, soon to be announced Neil Stevenson, as well as two terrific events in partnership with community friends. We're proud to host Tina Wyatt, the great-great-great-grandniece of Harriet Tubman, as part of the Northwest African American Museum's Descendants series, as well as No No Boy, who uniquely reclaims folk music through a Vietnamese American lens in an event co-presented with the Wing Luke Museum and the International Examiner. You can visit our website to join our email list and to get the latest updates as more programs are added throughout the season. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our civics programs are supported by the Real Networks Foundation, the True Brown Foundation, and the Wyncote Foundation Northwest. But as most of you know, Town Hall is at heart a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members watching tonight's event. If you share Town Hall's vision of a community invigorated through discussions of politics, science, and culture, please consider supporting us yourself by donating or by becoming a member. Last, you're likely here because you care about the issues in Derecka Purnell's book, and I know you'll want to go deeper into the topics by purchasing your own copy. Please use the link in the chat below to buy yours through Elliott Bay Book Company. If you keep your purchases local, we'll keep the things we love alive for the other side of this pandemic. With all of that, Derecka Purnell is a human rights lawyer, writer, and organizer who works to end police and prison violence by providing legal assistance, research, and trainings in community-based organizations through an abolitionist framework. A graduate of Harvard Law, she is the former editor-in-chief of the Harvard Journal of African American Public Policy, and her writing has been seen in the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Cosmopolitan, Harper's Bazaar, and Teen Vogue, among many other spots. Purnell's also appeared on NPR, Democracy Now!, Slate's What's Next, and MSNBC, among other media outlets. Derecka is in conversation with Nikkita Oliver, a Seattle-based creative, community organizer, abolitionist, educator, and attorney. They are the executive director of Creative Justice, a youth-led, community-based program offering an arts-based alternative to incarceration. Oliver also organizes with No New Youth Jail, Decriminalize Seattle, COVID-19 Mutual Aid Seattle, and the Seattle People's Party. Currently the Director of Inclusion and for Content and Marketing at Netflix, Darnell L. Moore is a media maker, educator, and writer focused on marginal identity, youth development, and other social justice issues in the US and abroad. Prolific writer, Darnell has been published in various media outlets, including the New York Times Book Review, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Ebony, and many more. And in 2018, he published the memoir, No Ashes in the Fire. Purnell's new book, Becoming Abolitionists, Police Protests and the Pursuit of Freedom, is the subject of this evening's discussion. Please join me in welcoming Nikkita Oliver, Darnell L. Moore, and Derecka Purnell.
Wow. Wow. Derecka, Nikkita, hi, y'all.
Hello. Hi to you both.
Listen, I know Nikkita and I are going to go back and forth with some questions for you, Derecka, but I wanted to start by one, thanking Seattle Town Hall for hosting this conversation, for hosting you. Such an honor to be here supporting you, my friend and sister. And I just got to say, before I jump into a question, like, it's one thing to write a book, and I know what it takes to write a book, right? It's another thing to write a book that is engaging, textually rich, that possesses clarity of voice, that's driven, that's even paced, that astutely researched, necessary, and damn good. So kudos to you. Kudos to you.
Wow, thank you. Wow.
So borrowing from what Nikkita really prompted us to sort of think through when we talked on the side, let's start with grounding ourselves, grounding you, like talking about context that through which you come to be, and also the words that you write. Who are your people? Where is home? What is home or homes? And what are the traditions that you locate yourself in within that have ultimately shaped your abolitionist politics?
Wow, that's a beautiful and very, very, very hard question. Thank you both for being here tonight. I'm just so enthusiastic. I have so much respect and excitement for which I have done in the world, which I continue to do in the world, and whatever the future holds. So thank you, thank you both. Y'all are my people. So start there. Where is home for me? So when I think of the word home, the first place that comes to mind is St. Louis. Just St. Louis. I realize how Midwestern I am whenever I go to New York City or LA, and I'm just like, whoa, it's a lot of people here, a lot of moving, a lot of stairs, a lot of hustling. And so when I think of home, I think of St. Louis, I think of Hickory Street, I think of, my neighbors on the South Side. I think of particular rec centers and particular basketball courts. I think of Buddha, I think of Wolves. I think that's what I think of when I think of home. I think of my great grandmother's house, right? Where when home was less tumultuous, we would gather and celebrate and talk trash and celebrate some more and eat. Home is tumbling on top of mattresses in an alley with my little brother before we would get in trouble. That's very much home to me. And home is where my people are. And so over the last year and a half, I have been so lucky to have been quarantining with my sisters. I'm the oldest of 6. I have 3 younger sisters, and we've all been quarantining together. And it's just been so beautiful because it's the first time as adults we've all lived together. So I got kicked out of my mama's house when I was 16. And have gone a bunch of different journeys and have been fortunate to be around people who love me and to care for me and push me and challenge me. And to be in a space with my sisters, I mean, the circumstances are obviously ridiculous, but to celebrate birthdays with them, to spend time with them has just been so rewarding. Home is my children, home is my partner. Home is at your house, my favorite pink bathroom. It's literally where my people are. When people have joy and people are truth tellers, even when it hurts. And so I find some political spaces I consider them my home, right? It's where I find people who are willing to tell the truth when it hurts. And so thank you for that question. I want to think about that some more.
For sure.
And then go ahead.
Go, please.
Now, I was thinking about the traditions too, because it's so much of it is related to culture, and then there are political traditions, and then there's this marriage between them, right? So when I think of which traditions I belong to, I would say that I belong to people who tell the truth when it hurts. Sometimes they lie too, and they take care of each other. So I would see my mom fight with my aunties, and they would still make sure we have food, right? It's that, that's the tradition I come from. You may say something that hurt me or upset me. I may say something that offends you, and we know that that's temporary, and we're going to try to figure it out, even if we take our time. And I'm going to make sure you eat. I'm going to make sure you have somewhere to live. And then the political traditions, I find the best of them have that too. It's when people think they ask me hard questions about abolition, the hardest questions I've been asked, and I ask of others, are in those political homes where we fight, we'll overtalk each other, we'll try to get to the bottom of a campaign. And then it's did you get food? What you ordering for lunch, right? It's that. I consider myself to be a part of that tradition. And I think that tradition is long and storied, and I hope to be a good steward of it.
That's so dope. I have a question for you, and then I think probably in gleaning from your answer, I'm sure Nikkita's gonna have something for you too. Abolitionism, and specifically prison and police abolition, form part of a broader tradition, right? And you trace this across time and place in your book. but it's one that has re-entered the public domain in a really interesting way, right? With force, with a type of popularity. And you answer this in many ways in your book, but your book is a unique contribution to conversations on abolitionism, one that pays homage to the feminist genealogy, to decolonizing, internationalist, disability justice, climate justice, racial justice politics, right? You do all of that
Right,
in a
yes.
pages of less than 300 pages. And amid all of the necessary chatter, and dare I say performative utterances of a type of abolitionism that proffers us to sort of talk shit, talk a good game, but not practice abolitionism. Like we'll talk about abolitionism and wear the abolitionist shirt and still rely on carceral logics. I'm just saying,
Yes.
you're doing something unique in this book, and it isn't it's a looking back, it's also a looking forward, it's a paying homage, but it's also a unique intervention. Why that approach? Why now? Why are you writing this book, right? And what is the particular intervention you're trying to make?
You did not come to play. Okay. Wow. So I think the first thing I'll say is that hearing you describe that, I think what I tried to do in the book is pull together a choir, right, of all these people who have been singing various songs of liberation. I think that's what that is. If I have one way to describe this book, I will hope that I'm like a choir director, or at least someone who, a medium, whatever, right? And so you have all these people from various different traditions, right? From organizers, activists, parents, lovers, people in different parts of the world, people with different identities that they organize through and live through. What I try to do is show look at how all these people are influencing this tradition and making this tradition and criticizing this tradition around abolitionism. Because I don't think it's enough for me to be like, hey, Derecka, write a book that's like, this is what you think what abolition is, right? I think it's so much more complicated than that. What I hope to do is show that, well, this is what I learned, right? This is how people pushed me and challenged me. This is how it shaped the person who I am right now, and hopefully the person I'm constantly becoming. And here are all the interventions that they made, not only into my life, but into the movement itself. And so I find myself to be a student of all these people. Like the idea that some people would say like, oh, you're an expert, can you come speak here? Can you do that? I find myself to be a perpetual student of everyone I talk about in this book, everyone I write about in this book. I remember having a conversation with someone about the disability justice chapter and just trembling because it's one of the areas that I want to learn more about, that I'm like trying to figure out like, how am I making sure I'm like, this is a main part when I'm in organizing spaces, I'm like bringing this up, I'm making sure we're included, like how I was so nervous to talk about it, but then to not talk about the role of disability justice activism, like, and its interventions into our movement would just be wrong. I couldn't tell a story about abolition without telling the story of climate change and climate activism and resistance to the warming earth, right? I couldn't tell a story about abolition by talking about the people who survive all kinds of violence, sexual violence, who escape murder. I mean, I couldn't talk about it without engaging with all of these people who continue to teach me. And so I think that the book, someone called it genre bending, which makes me feel like a film or something. But I think the book ultimately came out the way that it came out is because I've been very fortunate to be, a student of so many radical thinkers, activists, storytellers, artists, and they have influenced me greatly and continue to influence me. So hopefully that homage, it just goes all the way through, because that's me, that's who I am. Like that's what made me. And so if I do any of them justice, I will be very, very, very proud of that. And the second thing I'll say really quickly is that what I didn't want to happen is that precisely for the what you said, that, abolition, what'd you call it? Performative utterances. I didn't want people to be like, I want to be an abolitionist like Derecka, Right. What I hopefully try to do is say, look at all of these people doing so many different kinds of work. And there's an entry point for everybody who are trying to figure out how to get free. And here are countless examples. Here are different organizations. Here are different stories. I try to do that with a lot of intentionality. And so hopefully people can find their people too.
Yeah, I love that. And also the intersectionality of abolition. I think that often gets overlooked. It gets distilled down to being just about prisons or police, but ignoring that there are so many factors that actually lead to our dependency upon the carceral system and punitive systems, which includes climate justice. It includes, justice for survivors. It is a multifaceted, abolition should exist in all of our movements, right? You have so many accolades, and the thing that actually draws me to you is I'm also a Midwesterner, and hearing you talk about St. Louis, I almost immediately think about Ferguson, which for a lot of people was their first entrance into BLM as a movement, or being aware that about how people were moving in defense of Black lives. And I remember for myself as an abolitionist, or someone who holds abolitionist views, very distinctly sitting in a children's jail here in Seattle with a young woman who was around the age of 17. And she was telling me that she did not feel she could live outside of a jail, that she was institutionalized. And she's 17 telling me this. And I had a very distinct moment in a very long journey of thinking, wow, we are doing something wrong. And I couldn't fully put my finger on what it was, but I knew having a child sitting in front of me, telling me that this was the only place they could live for the rest of their life, meant we were doing something wrong. And I know that for a lot of people, St. Louis, Ferguson, and honestly, as an attorney, Missouri, because of its laws, hold a lot of those moments. Is there a moment in your life that connects to why you wrote this book that really triggered your journey into abolition as a part of your worldview?
Wow. I mean, I just sending so much love to that baby. It's heartbreaking, it's heartbreaking. And I mean, we know that it's not true, but it's heartbreaking. And thankful that, she has you. I think that before, when I was first asked this question, I would say it's Ferguson, or I would say, oh yeah, I started law school right after the Ferguson uprising. Michael Brown was killed about 10 minutes from my house, right before I was set to become this civil rights lawyer. But then when I tried to write that in the book, like, okay, where would I put this? I started remembering all of these other moments of not only national tragedy, but resistance to it. And it was like, oh, right. Like, I can't talk about, justice and Ferguson, the uprising. It's like being a catalyst for abolitionist thinking, because I had all these other influences like along the way. And so it's hard to say one particular moment, but in the book, I list several that I guess was starting to prepare me, right? So I talk about the Jena 6 in Louisiana, right? The group of Black boys who were charged with assault with a deadly weapon after they fought a group of white boys and put one of them in a hospital after the white kids told them they couldn't sit at the race tree, and they hung up nooses there, right? I remember watching that as a kid and learning that a prosecutor could charge a Black kid essentially with assault with a deadly weapon because he used a sneaker, right? Like that was like, wow, okay. And then you had Sean Bell being murdered in New York City the night before his wedding. You had Hurricane Katrina happened, right? And I remember the images of police. I remember looting. The first time I heard looting was during Hurricane Katrina. I was like, oh, what's this? This people are drowning. Y'all worried about theft, right? And it wasn't until much later, because of Critical Resistance's work, that I learned that the very first thing that was built after the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina was a jail, right? Like the very first institution that was a jail was built, right? And so Yeah, so there were all these moments that were quite politicizing, not just because of the violence, but because of the resistance, listening to different questions that people were asking at the time, watching people fight for justice and equality and me assuming that I knew that what they meant when they said that, right? Appealing to be, humanized, and not really, these words made sense to me, but I didn't have a political analysis around them, right? And so there is so many, Trayvon Martin when I was in college, Jordan Davis, like Troy Davis, right? All of these people who just experienced immense violence. And then there was a response, to what happened. And much like what happened last year, I think in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, it's like, for a lot of people, that was new. It was like, whoa, what's this? What's this thing that's happening? And it politicized them in a particular way. And so I think with each iteration of that freedom, then that violence and that resistance, I think I was very fortunate to find people who made me ask different sets of questions each time there was an uprising. And I think that iterative process helped me become an abolitionist.
So dope. Also, I'm over here like, Nikkita got the questions. Come through with the question. That's my I don't even like. This is family right here. I look, as somebody who spent a lot of time out in the world talking about a book, and for the most part, so much of the content of the book was the center of conversation as opposed to the actual art of writing it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I do want to ask a writerly question, because I also want to underscore that your ability to sort of tackle so much in your writing, right? Tracing like traditions of, I had to write this because I'm like, I cannot believe she did all of this. Like, you're tracing traditions of policing and carceral practices globally and across centuries, right? You tackle police reform, constitutional policing, consent decrees, movements, but you tie all of these threads around an absolutely like enthralling narrative, layer it with social history, legal theory and history, and life narrative. For anybody listening, I'm telling you as a writer that is not some easy shit to do. I'm just going to be very clear. So it is not a small task. Talk about your writing process and how you pulled together those pieces, how you threaded that in a way that did not leave me as a reader jarred by any movement in between. It felt very cohesive. That is hard work to do. I would just love to hear you talk a bit about that.
Wow. You making me want to read this book like I didn't write it. I said, that's my book. Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you. Wow. My writing process. So I cheated. That's what happened. I cheated. There was all this scholarship and theory and questions that people have been asking for decades, some for centuries other, and that I cheated because I was able to use a lot of their stuff to inform my thinking, right? That's so when you asked me earlier about the tradition, it's like I'm an inheritor of several grand traditions, right? And so I didn't have to do stuff from scratch, right? I found myself mostly being in conversation or intervening. When I found something cool in the archives, I tried to talk about it, right? But it's because I try to be faithful and critical and curious about the traditions that I find myself to be a steward of. So that's like the big things I cheat. I had a head start on writing this, right? I think the second thing that I have been doing throughout my entire life is just writing notes to myself, keeping track of articles, ideas, questions, people, or whenever I would come across something that was related to abolition or capitalism or colonialism, I started keeping it in this Google Doc. And this was back in like 2015, 2016. And so I had written just endless amounts of like notes and questions, and every page was like, what about the violence? Look at this study. Look at, study murders more. Look at murders in particular cities. Why do they happen? And the more questions that I had, the more that it took me out of the law, right? So I was finding myself reading psychology and sociology and critical criminal. So, trying to learn as much as I can, because I was like, wow, when people ask me what about the murderers, I want to like make sure that I at least understand at least what the field says. 'Cause I know what I say. I know what my people say. I know what my blocks say. I know what cops say. But what's this other stuff? I wanted to know. I took it seriously. So that all got into this like massive Google Doc that I had just been keeping for a long time. And then separately, I guess when was this? Around 2016. So maybe right after I had Garvey. Yeah, Garvey, my youngest, he'll be 5 in like 2 weeks. And so right after I had him, I was going through depression. I was experiencing like just depression and darkness and loneliness. And I found myself just writing these short little paragraphs about my life, like just different things I had gone through. I found it so therapeutic. I like shared them with a friend. I was like, yeah, I just need to like get this stuff out of me. And so like the stories, especially in the first chapter where I talk about wanting to bring my father back from the dead, right? Doing these seances with like my cousins when I'm like 5 and 6, they came out of a set of lyrics that I wrote during that time. Because I was like, man, like what's going on with me? Just searching for something. So a lot of those stories about the chocolate milk, like all of these pieces like that came from actually a really, really tough time in my life. And so what happened, I think with the book, you have this Google Doc, you have these sets of like personal stories of me trying to just to figure out who I am, what's going on with me, like those things are happening. There's like new ideas that are being put on the table and questioned and challenged. I belong to organizations, so there's social movements. I'm in reading groups with people who are, arguing about Du Bois, not just for scholarly reasons, because we're trying to figure out how we can use Du Bois to like implement a campaign, right? So all of those mesh with a time where people were asking, it sort of hit the mainstream. And so the writing process was just all of that. And then lots and lots and lots of mistakes, lots of bad writing. The first 3 months of writing, I couldn't even use any of that stuff. It was so bad. It was just October to December. It was terrible. It was bad stuff. Alessandra will tell you it's just not good. And so by the time January came around, I figured out like, okay, I think I have some rhythm. I think I have some way to, put this down on paper. And now, even when I read the book now, I'm just like, wow, okay, like I got that off. And some stuff I'm like, man, I wish I would have said this word instead of that word, right? And so, the writing process, again, was challenging, but I'm grateful for the other people who've, written before me, who sang, who done all kinds of stuff. So I was able to build on that work for this book. But thank you for that question.
Oh, I love that. That whole story just made me want to sit down and write.
Do it, please.
Because as Black people, reading and writing is a liberatory tradition. Our language and access to written language, when brought to Turtle Island, was an intentional thing to keep us from being able to interact in both the legal and social spaces that were happening around us. So reading and writing is a part of a liberatory tradition that we come from. And I love that you're talking about sets of questions. And it kind of drives me down two lines of thought. I think you can tie them together. One is, I think that our generation is now also creating our own tradition. There's something very powerful about the intersectional text that we are bringing forward. And Darnell already, touched on this some about you bringing it from the divine feminine perspective of bringing it in a way that is decolonized and grounded in climate and environmental justice. And I'm wondering, within the tradition that I would say you're giving birth to now for us, where do you see yourself fitting in the multitude of materials that are coming out right now for folks to access? And when you were writing this book, what question did you hope that people would be left with? Because for me, when I deliver something, I'm not necessarily always hoping to leave someone with an idea. I love the idea that a person left with their own questions. And I'm just wondering, where are you in the tradition? What questions are you wanting to leave us with for the next generation to be building on.
Wow. So let me get clarity on the first one. So you said among the people who are writing right now, can you say more about that question?
Yeah, I'm reading Miriam Kaba. I'm reading, I got a list of books. I can't even think of all of them. You know what I'm saying? There's so many brilliant minds that are leading the way, many of them Black and Indigenous femmes, guiding us towards understanding abolition in a holistic way. You're bringing something unique here. Where do you see yourself in that tradition? And what question are you hoping lingers with folks when they engage with the tradition that you're helping to birth right now? Because I feel like 50 years from now, someone's going to be reading this book. And they're going to say to someone like Darnell, I was reading Becoming Abolitionists and I cheated to write the next version,
I hope that would, oh my gosh, that's just too much. Where do I see myself? So in the beginning, when Darnell asked, like, how did I pull all this together? And I said, well, hopefully it's a choir of all these, voices and thinkers and artists, right? The inverse, like for your question, I see myself as like one person, this larger choir of people who are singing to get free, who are trying to figure out, like, how do we attack it at all of these different ways? And so I think hopefully my work is an offering alongside a lot of the texts that are entering into the mainstream. And most importantly, like to showcase like the work that's actually being done. Like that's sort of what I hope. I mean, I think that the format, I would say the format is probably a bit unique because there is a lot of personal storytelling. So people like have urges to call it, memoir. I resist memoir, but if that helps people get through the book, is a memoir. You can call it a memoir. I know why cage birds sing, whatever. Whatever you need to do to finish a book, you can call it that. I think what's also true about this book is that I try to think about, it's weird saying I tried to think about because it wasn't like super intentional. Like I just wrote from the place of like who I am. But I also try to think about different communities that I belong to, that sometimes I would say in the mainstream fall outside of abolitionist conversations, like my faith. I read about my faith, throughout the book. I have an interesting relationship to the church, so you probably see that throughout the text. Sometimes I'm like defending it and protecting it. And other times I'm like, whoa, this is wrong. We have to fight it. Right. And so it's, my faith, my spirituality is a very, very important part of my life. And when I, pray with my kids at night, we pray against capitalism. We pray for the organizers. We pray for the workers, right? These are our prayers, right? And so I was just thinking, well, that's an important side of me that I don't know if people usually put together, like faith and abolition, right? But it's very, very important. I try to talk about my parenting a lot because sometimes abolition gets treated as this thing for like young people with a lot of energy, with nothing but time on their hands, college students. And it's like, whoa, y'all, I'm divorced. I'm co-parenting. I got 2 kids. I gotta run errands. Like there's so many people who I think are trying to figure out how to raise their children to be great people and with a good political analysis or out view on the world. So that's a part of me that I wanted to be honest about and write in the book. And yeah, I think there's some like benefits to that because it's a different kind of offering than a text that's like only about the history of abolition or only about examples, right? It's like, well, like here we get to see a person who's navigating lots of different identities and roles and responsibilities and still have time to read and study and debate and be a part of an organization. And so hopefully this offering is unique in that way, but I hope it's not solely unique in that way, right? Which is why there's also theory in here. It's why there's also, so all of this stuff. So yeah, it's a lot going on, but I think it accomplishes at least what I try to do is be honest and talk about, I want the freedom to grow and to be wrong. And that's also another thing too. I got to talk about how wrong I was. Before we got on, what you said about how you were at 17. Like I done went through I was so wrong and so popular about things I was wrong about in my early 20s. Like I'm so happy that I have the freedom to like not worry about being canceled or being dragged for like some of my ideas. It's like, yeah, hopefully we change. you want people to stay the same. You ain't gonna get free with nobody staying the same. So that is, I think, part of it. And the second part of the question.
Yeah, is there a question that you hope people are finish reading your book?
Question. I have this like really naive dream that people are like, where do I sign up? But that's probably not the best question. Hopefully the next question is, where can I learn more, and who can I learn it with? Those are the questions that I hope people like. Where, if this is the first book someone read on abolition, hopefully it's not the last, right? If this isn't the last book, I hope that it contributes, more information or a different perspective in addition to other books that they read. But most importantly, what else can I do? What can I learn, and who can I do it with?
I love that. I have this thing that I have to do when I'm talking to writers, because I know how much we can talk about the written word and never really engage the words that they write. So in lieu of a question, I just want to read words back to you that you wrote, because they're glimmering moments of like poetic clarity and power.
Yeah.
And reminds me of the beauty that exists in the radical politics that we uphold and uplift, right? And I think that it is, what you did is art. You write, for example, unlike, and
off camera,
I know, no, you don't, no, you're not. You're gonna stay right there. Because I think there's a lesson here. I'm talking about this very literally, but there is a lesson in how we can find beauty in the ashes, yes, but also beauty in the work that we do. I think there's a way that we talk about this as if it's bereft of joy and beauty, when in fact it is beautiful work. You write, unlike any other generation of Black students ever, my freshman year of college coincided with the election of the first Black president. Barack Obama was my kite. Kites are beautiful. Watching a colorful thread soar made me feel like I was having a conversation with a butterfly, like I could hold on one for a while. With wind, kites rise. We are supposed to let them fly, then pull in on the line to manage the climb. Kites reward us when we allow them to work with wind, space, and control. Otherwise, they disappoint, become tangled, crash. Obama was supposed to be proof that the United States could let people of color soar with the right space, control, and wind beneath their wings. I voted for him twice, filled with hope. I set up voter registration sites, organized get out the vote rallies, and the second time he was elected, I saved money to fly to Washington, D.C. to attend his inauguration. I stood several hours on a corner in D.C. for inauguration tickets in January 2013, not because there was a line stretching around the Capitol, but because my best friend was lost in the pre-inauguration traffic and I forgot where she had dropped me off. Anyway, I wanted to be like Obama, a Black lawyer who spoke truth about freedom and justice for everyone. Flags are not as beautiful to me as kites. That's stunning writing. And your ability to capture so much of the heft and power of abolitionism, grounded in a very deeply intersectional politic, and do it beautifully, is to be celebrated.
Wow. Thank you, Darnell. Thank you so much. Wow.
I know there's questions from audience we're supposed to take, right? So maybe Nikkita and I could be looking out for them if they send them.
Yeah, I have a few. Thank you. And thank you for reading that section. There's so much in that metaphor. And also, as someone who was also originally very excited when Obama was elected, thinking through the pressure we put on so many of our Black folks, whether they're writers or lawyers or doctors or nurses or sanitation workers or checkout clerks, wherever you are, there's so much expectation for us to be able to deliver on liberation. And that could become something that weighs people down, but the image of the kite is just such a strong opportunity to think about what it means for us to fly and to soar. And at the same time, acknowledge there are limitations. A kite has a string on it, right?
Yeah.
And we can achieve nothing on our own, which I think ties into this next question. You're not just a writer, you're not just a lawyer, in my opinion, you're also an organizer. And I'm wondering if you could speak to some of the work that you do in ending or addressing police violence, addressing decarceration and building, a world beyond prisons and police. What's the work that you're doing? What are some of the orgs that you're partnering with? What are some of the trainings or community campaigns that you might be focused on that is taking what you wrote in a book that is actually symbiotic with what you wrote in your book, right? It's work that's feeding itself. It's cyclical,
Yes. So before the pandemic, it was just so much easier, like just so much easier, right? And so before the pandemic, most of that work I had done was with this organization called Ferguson Collaborative. So what the Ferguson Collaborative does is try to figure out how to reduce power that the police have in Ferguson, Missouri, especially through what's been granted to them from the consent decree in order to improve or reform their policing. And so, for example, I would think about, well, what are the ways we can use this consent decree to then figure out how to maximize community power in this area, how to free people from the carceral state, either by clearing their warrants or helping get cases dismissed, or, revising the policies that are coming through the DOJ, because the DOJ has a provision that allows the community to give input on use of force policies. What does it mean? How do we prepare to go to court and prepare testimony to show the judge, hey, look, the Ferguson Police Department is not being cooperative with the terms of the consent decree. The DOJ, they don't really care that much. So how do we figure out how to make sure we raise the community stakes and buy-in in this process? And so that was happening. I was very, very excited to be working with that group again. But what's so messed up is that since the pandemic has happened, a lot of those court hearings have moved to tele hearings, and now the community has even less input, like less opportunity they don't get a chance to participate, right? And even if they, write a letter and say, hey, look, we want to figure out how to do this. We want to figure out how to, to even reform the police, because not all of them are abolitionists. We want to figure out how to input. The court now won't even accept their comments. They would just give it directly to the police. And so it's just like a mess that I'm trying to figure out how to get back involved in that particular fight. And I've been literally in the last month, ever since the book has been done, it's like, okay, y'all, let's go. So that's one. Other political work, I actually don't talk about a lot because I'm usually afraid of those particular campaigns being targeted. And so there's an organization I'm trying to, for the last year and a half, have been trying to help build and get off the ground that I'm actually very excited about. I think it's going to give a lot of people of color, especially in this country, just an opportunity to push back on capitalism, in a way that's really concrete and exciting. So that's something I spend honestly most of my weeks trying to figure out how to be in struggle. I know earlier when I said there are questions that people ask me about abolition or about capitalism that they think are hard questions or they think are gotcha questions, but these are questions every week that I'm fighting with people over, that I'm struggling with people over. It's that's intense. Some examples of trainings that I do. So earlier this year, every single training that I do it in communities that I'm with struggle with. So it's not like a consultant thing. I'm not getting paid. None of this stuff is paid. It's we're comrades and we're trying to figure out how to get free. This is my political work. And so earlier this year, I had a chance to work with this organization called the Freedom Community Center. It's in North St. Louis. Y'all, the founding ED of this organization, I don't even get off on nonprofits, but he's legit. His name is Mike Milton. He was a member of this other organization, Action St. Louis, and then he ran the Bell Project autonomously in St. Louis. And then he left the Bell Project to create this organization to do so many different things. One thing that it does is it figures out how to divert people, even people accused or charged with violent crimes, divert them from going to jail. So this is the first program in the country that diverts people who are charged with violent crimes out of jail and into like this particular program. He's trying to figure out, well, how, instead of incarcerating people, how can we figure out how to get them everything they need and also expect them to be members of this organization to build power? And so everyone on the team right now that he works with are all people with radical politics, all people who are formerly incarcerated. And so that's who we like, figuring out abolition, capitalism, how to, make sure you're doing street violence interrupting programs for people who are nervous if we're going to try to close down the jail. So that's a community organization that I am the most excited about, like the potential of that. Because people would say of abolitionists, like, you don't care about murderers, you don't care about Black communities. And of all places in St. Louis, that Mike and that team opened up on the north side in that neighborhood where they are, it's just, it means the world. Like, that's actually the work, right? And so that is like so it's like, how are we reading together? How are we thinking about this campaign you want to do? How do we figure out how to like make sure that there's like community buy-in with this campaign? What's our political education? What's our public education? What is it internally? What is it externally, right? How do we figure out if like which stakeholders, what fund, all of that stuff to like make sure that we're pushing to reduce our reliance on incarceration, on police. And we're also making sure that people in that community get the needs that they get, right? And so that I feel incredibly lucky that people trust me to be in struggle with them. To be in constant conversation with them. When I think of my people, I think of Action St. Louis, I think of Dream Defenders, who I've done lots of work with in Florida. I mean, it's just a lot. And now starting my own organization, it's just, I feel very, very lucky. And I continue to learn from them too. That's why they all up in this book.
So amazing. We have two questions that are quite connected that I'll ask together. One, you mentioned your faith. Can you talk about the connection of your faith to abolition? And then the second part, you already know me, Derecka. This is like my thing. So I'm sitting over here like I'm ready for as you speak of weaving your faith with your abolitionism, are there biblical narratives that have grounded or impacted your abolitionist work?
Wow. What a question. Okay. My faith in abolition. Yes. Oh my gosh. So this is like, I'm getting strangely emotional about my faith in abolition. I think that in the beginning of the last chapter, I talk about when I let go of the idea of heaven and hell and how that was very scary for me, especially as someone who tried to evangelize people so they wouldn't go to a place where they would burn eternally. And that how climate change made me much more afraid than hell because it was much more real. It was happening right now. And letting go of these stories of heaven and hell increased my urgency as a activist right now. It was just like, these material conditions need to be changed right now. Like, how do we figure out how to meet people's material needs right now? It's not enough to say that your suffering is going to be over and once you cross into the afterlife. That wasn't enough for me. And so I found abolition to be just one way of many ways, just one way of figuring out how to eliminate unnecessary suffering that's in the world. So much of it, right? It's like, yeah, we deserve to live better lives right now. And even if I'm not going to see it, the people who are fighting for me, like who are fighting for that future, deserve to do that. And so I don't know who I was just in conversation with who said, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And that's the definition of abolition. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. It is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things unseen, right? Because I'm not going to see a future without police. There's, almost 1 million cops. There's 18,000 law enforcement agencies, right? There's 2,300 jails and prisons. I'm not going to see those things closed, but that's the substance of what I hope to become, right? And what we do now is going to be the evidence. It's the fruits of what hopefully our work is going to bear. So that the scripture and then just the sense of urgency of doing that liberation work right now. And I know Christianity, I guess I consider myself a Christian. It's more complicated because I don't consider myself like an evangelical Christian. I believe in, I'm like a Jeremiah Wright Christian. I'm like that kind of Christian because I believe in people who tell the truth. And I don't, I believe in people who tell the truth. And so when I think about Jesus, I think about someone who turns over tables, who is, unarmed, executed person by the state, right? For being a truth teller. Like that's the tradition I see myself in. Someone who curses an entire tree because the fruit is rotten. He don't say, what about the bad apples? He ain't say, what about the bad figs? He cursed the whole tree. Come on, it's so easy. It's right there. It's literally right there. If you a Christian, you're not abolitionist, right there. It's all in the text, right? And so that's sort of the traditions. I think that Jesus missed the mark a lot. It's very unfortunate. I think about the story of the woman who's getting stoned, who's about to get stoned, and Jesus dares everyone who is just like, look, like he without saying, cast the first stone. And instead of saying like, go get the man, we're about to stone both of them, Jesus is like, no one's about to die right now, right? And sometimes I'm nervous that when Black people are fighting for like equality, they're fighting to get the same level of treatment. Sometimes I worry that that's going to increase punishment for everybody, right? It's gonna, I think it's going to be like, go get the other people, we'll stone them too, to make sure that it's equal and that it's just, instead of fighting for everyone to put their stones down. So I see abolition as a politic that way, like in my faith, like everyone needs to put their stones down. Let's get to the problem of what's happening. So I think that I'm a casual Jeremiah Wright Christian. That's, a subject to change right now that works for me. And I'm just learning, like I'm still journeying, I'm still becoming.
Oh, that's so powerful. I often call myself a recovering Christian. Grew up very much in the church. But, one of the things that really resonates with me, not just as an abolitionist, but a restorative and transformative justice practitioner, is seeing the way we collectively contribute to harm or collectively contribute to quote unquote sin, that is not an individualized thing that a single person needs to own up for. It is something as a community that we need to do work around. And when you talk about meeting basic needs or doing mutual aid, those are things for me that I still, though I don't go to church anymore, still find in the scripture, like affirm this idea of us collectively restoring ourselves to wholeness as a collective. And so one of the questions, and I think, you probably hear this a lot, is I think folks can think of abolitionists as a small group of angry activists. But I really think there is actually a much larger tradition that is really a worldwide vision of abolition. Can you speak to some of the global tradition around abolition that connects, us, both North and Global South, Indigenous people worldwide?
Yeah, so I actually don't know about the global tradition of abolition. So that's something I wouldn't know if I would characterize it. I think that there are fights that have been abolitionist in spirit. And I'm not also one of the people who think that abolition can accomplish everything, right? I don't think that abolition is inherently anti-colonial, right? I think that people can make an argument that it is, or I haven't yet at least been convinced by those arguments. And so at least what I try to do in the book is say, well, I was like trying to figure out and learn about this abolition thing. And I was watching people in South Africa and Brazil, argue and fight for decolonization. And I was like, oh, wow, I think there's lots of opportunity for like both of these things to inform each other, but I don't think they're the same. I remember one time I was listening to this South African student use intersectionality, use Kimberly Crenshaw's work as to say that Black women in this country need to be protected. And if we want to protect them, we would, charge someone automatically when we accuse them of sexual violence, right? So I'm like hearing like bits and pieces of like, ideas that have liberatory potential, and then also nervous because in practice, the way they're being deployed. And I think that happens also in the United States. And so I don't know if there's like a global, I know that there's a global abolitionist tradition because I know that there are people in other countries who are fighting to reduce the carceral state. I met a number of them at this conference I went to in 2018, called the International Conference on Penal Abolition. It was in London. There's an organization in Australia called Sisters Inside. They do incredible abolition work, especially with Indigenous and Aboriginal women in Australia, right? They're trying to get people out and, reduce the incarceration there. I know there's organizations like Talo Salud in Puerto Rico, who, I don't consider them United States. And that was something that I had to like come to understand. I don't know if y'all remember when the hurricane happened and people were fighting like, oh man, this is our country. They're Americans too. And remember all the Puerto Ricans I met when I was there who were just like, we want to be free. We don't want to be a state. We're not trying to be Americans. We're trying to be free. So learning about their resistance to incarceration, especially as peoples who are often displaced because of climate change. So trying to free people from prisons that are set up at the periphery of the island. And so I know that there are these traditions and fights and that are also like emerged and messy and complicated and nuanced. And I think that as much as we can, we should learn from these traditions and, share what we learn too. But I think abolition is part of this broader struggle of liberation. And even though people may not call it abolition, or sometimes they will, or sometimes it's different, it's important that we are like taking time to study that. That's a good question.
It's a great question. I have one final one from the audience. I know we're at time, but I thought it's a pretty easy one, I think. As a new lawyer,
I don't trust you.
as a new lawyer who is engaging with abolitionist ideas and practices increasingly, which sections of the book would you suggest I recommend to fellow lawyers who may not be on the track to become an abolitionist just yet?
Wow. Which sections of the book?
All of it, but you may have some specific ones.
All of the above. And lawyers know how to read. We have to read so much. This was a one night of reading if you're a lawyer. What sections of the book? I would definitely say Love and Abolition. I would say Love and Abolition, only because it goes from me being in law school through me becoming a new lawyer. And it talks about my first time representing somebody in court. And just being like, this is court. Like I had known court, I had been in court, I had family members in court. I've gone through like custody removals. So I know like court, but to represent someone in this particular system, it shows that, it details that, and takes me, that's happening alongside the development of my abolitionist politics. And so I would say that chapter, if you have to choose, and then probably the conclusion. Well, the first chapter is first chapter, fourth chapter, conclusion, maybe fifth chapter too, and sixth, because it's about violence. Like you gotta read the stuff about violence. And so
pretty much, y'all, she said all of it.
Yeah, all of it. But yeah, just choosing one is very, very hard. Oh, and then chapter 7, the stuff around humanization, because I know clients, there are lots of lawyers who's like, the courts, they just don't see our clients as human. We just need to humanize our clients. And so chapter 7, it's just like, well, you can humanize your clients all you want. They're going to be humans in a cage. Like that's what's going to happen. They're going to be humans in front of the courtroom. They're going to be sentenced as humans. Like it's not enough, right? And so chapter 7 is also really important for lawyers who think they can humanize our way out of carceral logics and power. It's like, no, we gotta do more. We gotta do much more than that. So yes, whole book, but 1, 4, 7 conclusion, 5 and 6 2, and then 2 and 3.
Thank you so much. And thank you for taking time to engage with Nikkita and I. I can speak for myself for engaging me. And Nikkita, I'll let you speak for yourself in the conversation. This has been glorious.
Yes, thank you so much. How much you want to bet a professor just asked you to write their syllabus for them? But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for pouring intention into this book, and for the work, because I know you're about that work and that organizing you'll continue to do. I really thank you for the fruit of that labor and being a part of this tradition of seeing our communities be liberated and free.
Oh, wow. Of course. Thank y'all so much. I was so exhausted today. It's been such a day. And y'all got my spirits all up. It's 10 o'clock. I'm all where we going after, but I guess we're not going nowhere because we virtual in 3 different places. But thank y'all for y'all work. Thank you for all of what you've done to inspire me and to inspire so many people. Thank y'all for meeting people's needs, from your families to the blocks. Like, just literally thank y'all so much. I'm just so grateful for this. And I don't want it to end, but I guess it has to.
Well, on behalf of Town Hall, I want to thank all 3 of you for such a rich conversation. Everything you said, Derecka, was so enlightening. So a lot to take away from this. I think that we all found our next read for sure. I want to thank the audience as well. Thanks for your questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but thank you for submitting them. And I encourage you to purchase.
Thank you to all the interpreters and the people who are making sure that everyone can attend this event.
I want to encourage you, if you are interested in purchasing a copy of the book, that you use the link in the chat so we can support Elliott Bay, a local store tonight. And yeah, I hope that we get to host all of you in person someday soon. But until then, I hope you have a great night.